guys, thanks for joining us on the Booster Pack. This is part 2 of our interview with Chuck Kallenbach, where we are going to discuss more about his career. So there is no traditional intro on this one. You can catch that on part 1, where we talk about the Star Trek CCG, the Star Wars CCG, and of course the Lord of the Rings TCG, all produced while he was working with Decipher. Now, check that out. It was some fascinating information there as well. And don't forget to check out the bonus episode we have with Chuck coming out probably in a few weeks' time, where he talks about some of the unproduced material that Decipher was offered during their heyday in the late 90s, early 2000s. Okay, that's it from me. Enjoy the episode proper. Again, remember there's no intro, so we're just going to drop in here with Chuck starting his conversation about .hack. Catch you for the outro.
There's one game that, instead of coming down like that from higher management and the legal department, that bubbled up because we were playing it at home, and that game is .hack, because we were playing .hack, and as we played it, we found that I think it was Tom's wife, Kathy, I think, that said, you guys should do a game of this, and she started pushing it. I was like, okay, fine. So I went and I talked to Anthony, the lawyer, and he said, well, I'll look into it. You know, he was like, I don't know what you're talking about. But the .hack franchise was at that point supposed to be this large. It had movies, and it had TV shows, and it had card games, and it had all kinds of things.
So for those who don't know, .hack is basically like an anime that is essentially an MMORPG world that is populated by tons of characters and stuff like that, and they're playing in this sort of virtual realm. The
interesting thing about the .hack, at least the first .hack Sign, which was the first anime TV show, I don't know how many episodes it was that there were 2 plots going on. One of them was in the real world, when people were becoming comatose because they were playing the game. The game, I believe, was called The World, and you always said The World. And then there were lots of things that happened. People would log in, and they would go into the game and play their characters. So we produced, of course, again, we're working from the DVDs, so we've got images for all this stuff. We had cards for the investigations going on in the real world, and then we had cards for battling monsters in the game itself. So that was really cool to me, and it was, as they say, no part of the buffalo is wasted. If there's, we're not going to make a game about the online world if there's also stuff about about the real world stuff. We're going to use that too. We use everything we can find. So so that was really very exciting to be able to go to your boss basically and say, can we do a game on this game that I'm playing? And they go, yeah, sure.
That's so interesting, because I always wondered why that particular franchise was chosen, but you guys were playing obviously the video game versions for PlayStation 2 and stuff, I think, at that time. That's amazing. So you've got this idea, you've got this this thing of just like, this property is fantastic, let's try this. Things like Yu-Gi-Oh and Dragon Ball Z and Gundam were all hitting the West around this time. So Decipher's like, well, we want a piece of this anime pie, and you yourself are given the task, bring this game .hack to life. And tell me how that comes about. Tell me how you start approaching it as a designer for this completely new original game. It wasn't weighed down with like the previous Star Wars game weight. You didn't have to do Destiny cards, although that was part of it as well. Tell me all about that.
That was Mike Reynolds and I worked on that game and came up with the systems for combat and whatever. And the interesting thing is, after my previous speech that I told you about, in which I said, as God is my witness, there must not be Destiny. Mike and I had played our combat system for a while, and I said, I think we need to add Destiny. He said, yeah, I think so. So other people were like, you made a big speech, what's the deal? I said, well, it needs Destiny. It's like, the soup needs salt. Just the way it works. The catchword now is variance. It needs variance, So personally, I hated Destiny because it was like, I bought this card, I put this card in my deck, I drew it, and I played for it. And now you tell me I got to roll a die by pulling a card, and it might not work. I hated that. But anyway, yeah, so we had Destiny. And again, it was looking at the game and saying, okay, there's you can have a party of 3 PCs. You can have 3 PCs in our game. By the way, the game did not have a name for a long time during the process until I finally, and I took a screenshot of this and brought it to work. When you're playing .hack and there's something sneaking up behind you, there's 2 arrows and it says enemy.
Yep. A warning. Yep.
Let's call it .hack enemy. And we're like, oh yeah, okay.
Well, that was such a good way to incorporate the fact that the NPC sort of characters, the enemy characters, were such a big component in the game as well.
Right, that's right. And it was about killing your. Again, we intermingled the decks, right? We had my deck had monsters for you to kill.
Yep.
I loved it, and we went on barnstorming tours, which we haven't talked about.
Right.
So these were a lot of fun, and I went to a place. God, I wish I knew where it was. And they were so happy to see me. The guys that ran the shop were so happy to see me. They said, we love .hack here. We sell so much of it. We said, we sell more .hack than we sell Magic the Gathering. I said, wow. So it was great. And we sat down and played Steel Deck, and everybody was real excited about the game. And that was awesome.
Yep. So
there were some places where, if your store was relatively new and you're like, well, do I want to carry the Magic the Gathering? Well, it's got, how many years of sets of stuff, or I can just get this .hack game right off the bat. We can play that. So it was a big hit at some places.
That sort of lines up with another Decipher employee I had him recently in my 4th episode. Actually spoke about his eventual Jason Winter, who you actually mentioned before from the Star Wars catastrophe at Worlds. He actually mentioned that his game as well, his Full Metal Alchemist TCG, also had that sort of regional concentration. And I think a lot of the games that were coming out then, in some places felt like a big deal, whereas other places felt like, who had ever even heard of this? Games like Legend of the Five Rings traded on this for decades. There was a ton of games like that I feel like were completely, almost to use the phrase, legend in their own store lunchbox, in a sense, became legendary in their own areas, and those games were much beloved. I love to hear those stories. So .hack was the same, and you saw these concentrated pockets of regional sort of communities building up around your game.
Our marketing department would get in touch with people. They'd say, hey, we're doing a tour through the Northeast. Do you sell .hack? Would you like to have somebody come by and demo the game and answer questions about it? Like this guy that was selling a ton was like, yeah. So you would generally get people that were excited about it. Some stores would be like, well, I don't carry that, but come on by and do a demo, blah, blah. So, it was kind of hit and miss.
So you've had this .hack game. It's been successful in certain pockets, but eventually all good things shall pass. The game ends up coming to an end. Tell us about what it was like wrapping up the game. Did you know it was coming? Was it an all of a sudden thing?
Usually when a game ends, the people working on it will know about it. There's often, everybody always asks, is there another set of this? Because if you're just barreling away on a game and you're making another set, then usually the decision comes after that. So you have a set laying around. But with .hack, we were running out of monsters. There were only so many in the game. And we pleaded with the people from Bandai, say, look at our CGI cards we've done. Let us make some new monsters. And the guys had mocked up some of them. They look great. They're as good as the monsters in the game, because they were screenshots. Those characters, those monsters were screenshots. So anyway, we knew it was going to end, and the last set was called Breakout. And so the question you get when Breakout comes out, people are like, oh, I heard some rumors that the game's going to end. Is Breakout going to be the last set? And I said, no, there's another set called, I'm going to say, Infection, and that's the next set. And they all said, oh, that's great. Infection was a name I made up that was like all the other names. They were like Contagion, Distortion, Epidemic. So sounded perfect. Oh, great, they're working on another set. And then they went away happy. And I knew that there would never, ever be a set called Infection or whatever that was. So that was handy for me, because with the Star Wars games, it was pretty clear that we were losing the license. So like, you can make another Young Jedi set? Well, no, we're not. But I've had this happen before, that games have, when they're going to end, the people making it usually know ahead of time. And it becomes a question of how to handle that. And it's not fun. There's nothing fun about it.
Okay, so the next thing you come down the line, you've obviously got one anime game. We've got another one coming down the line, which is Beyblades, which is such a fascinating property to make a collectible card game about. Can you give me any insight into how that property landed in Decipher's lap?
Well, again, it's the kind of thing that like games usually do. They said, we're going to do a Beyblade game. And we all looked at the people that are telling us that, and we said, we don't know anything about Beyblade. They said, have you ever watched an episode? No. Have you ever played with the toys? No. We don't know anything about it. We said, okay, so here's what we do. This is what we always do. The process that you do with license, it's not, it's like you're a big Star Wars fan. Well, let's just write some Star Wars cards. You don't have to read anything, do you? Well, of course you do. There's a big research effort that has to be made to find out how everything works and make sure you get it right. So we basically had someone on staff watch the episodes of Beyblade, making notes. This is what is called now a subject matter expert, I think.
Right.
So, and then we started working on the mechanics, and we knew something about how the fights went, and it was pretty straightforward, I think. But we had any questions about, we found this name, who is this guy? Erica would say, oh, he was in episode 12. He did this and this and that. So you can say, well, you morons, why did you have people make the Beyblade game that didn't know anything about it? Well, that's not how it works. You don't do it. You don't do it out of stuff you remembered from watching the TV show. You have to go dig it up. So that was fascinating. The combat system for Beyblade was matching up card edges, which was utterly fascinating to me. I didn't come up with that.
Right. Well, that's sort of emulates what the show does, where it's the spinning tops smashing against one another, right?
Right. I thought that was very good and different.
Yeah.
And
yep.
I didn't work very much on Beyblade. I probably named some cards and maybe wrote some. I don't know if they had lore. I don't think they had lore.
Right.
But yeah, that was Dot Hack, Young Jedi and Dot Hack and Beyblade were originally designed to appeal to a younger audience because, as someone at the office said, there are 6-year-olds playing Pokemon. I said, they're not playing Pokemon. They're just putting cards out and looking at them. So, they seem to think there was some untapped market of 6-year-olds that really wanted to play CCGs if we just got the right one. And none of that ever happened. I remember there was complaints in the office about, we're doing another game based on a game. I said, yeah, well, yeah. Really, it was based on the TV property, though, if you think about that. Dot Hack was kind of 50-50 because all the monsters were screenshots from the games, the video games, and everything else was from the episodes of the TV show. So it was kind of a little bit of both, basically. So Beyblade, yeah, MegaMan too came out around then, right?
Of course, yeah, that's right. Well, you designed that system yourself as well, right?
I worked on that. I think I worked on that with Mike. I don't remember, or maybe Joe. Yeah, I didn't know. Everybody's like MegaMan, yeah, and I was like, I never played any MegaMan games. And we're like, well, they're really good. And I said, okay, fine. And I went and talked to my son, and he said, you never played MegaMan? I said, no, I never. So anyway. The interesting thing about that was the thing about terminology. We had a term that was called threshold throughout playtesting.
Okay. At
the very end, this is one of the good at the very end decisions, which are probably more rare than the other kind. We said, we're changing that to blast. So everywhere in the cards it said blah, 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 blast. And all the playtesters were like, that's terrible. I hate that. That's no good. And it's like, well, we're going to go ahead and do that. And I said, that's fine. So the game came out and playtesters played it after it had been released. They said, wow, blast is really good. And we're like, yeah, there you go. That's right. You get used to things when you're playtesting, and when you change them, you make a suggestion for something different. You're like, oh my God, it's terrible. But you have to, I don't know, you have to kind of go with your gut there. But sometimes things can be improved in that respect because you can't hold on to things that's been that way through playtesting. So, yeah, you can't do that.
So let me jump on there. Let's almost track back a bit, because this is in a very formative time for Decipher. So they came into the market as juggernauts of sort of major licensed properties. You had things like Star Trek, then you had things like Star Wars, and then, gasp, you've got Lord of the Rings, probably the three biggest geek properties that have ever graced popular culture. Now, they start to get into things like you said, like Hack, like MegaMan, like Beyblades. These things shift to a different sort of level of perspective while we have this anime invasion going on in the collectible games market throughout the early 2000s, wrought by things like Pokemon, then eventually Digimon, Gundam, Dragon Ball Z. These shows that started showing on Saturday mornings and breakfast television and stuff like that. Now, we were talking before, Decipher loses a license for Star Wars, but they're still really happy with the way that the game plays. So there is basically a rescue effort to save the mechanics, but separating it from the property itself. They bring out a game in about 2004 called just simply Wars, a space opera set game with a similar sort of idea. Do you want to talk to me about what that was, how that came about, how long you guys were working on it, when this idea was sort of born to sort of, Phoenix from the ashes, the mechanics of Star Wars CCG into this new property, or the original property?
We all believe that the engine in Star Wars CCG was excellent and deserved to be, continued, and who better to do it than us. The beginning of the development of the IP, I was not involved in. I came in a little bit late on that, and but the whole idea of the rift and aliens coming through the rift, I loved the idea that it was our solar system, and a very limited number of aliens, and the idea of the different factions who came from Earth or were on Earth. There was one on Mars and the one in the belt. I thought, I loved this subject so much. I really did. And so the concepting started up and went on, and we got Mike Stackpole involved again. I know Mike Stackpole for years and years, and he wrote the first story about I'm not sure. I think that had Raving Red Jane, but I could be wrong. Anyway, so we had stories, and we decided we were going to have short stories that we were going to put on the web. So I became in charge of editing them. I'm still here, and I wrote a bunch. I wrote a bunch of short stories. And my stories were all short stories. I mean, very short. And it's not because I didn't have time or anything. It's just because I like stories like that. I like watching, Love and Death and Robots and stuff like that, where something happens, blah, blah, blah. Ooh, maybe there's a twist, and then we're done, and we're moving on. So
also, that was the medium, that the way you were presenting it to fans, right? Like, they were going to jump on the website and read this in their day. It wasn't a sprawling epic.
Yeah, I didn't feel like we had to give them a 3,000 word opus. I just felt like, let's tell a little story. But the interesting thing was, to me, that we had these weird alien races like this. She were like dolphins, and they floated, and I wrote a story about a she commander who missed his family, and I wrote a story about a bot that got his arm ripped off from the point of view of the bot, and it was a lot of fun to me, and I still have all those things. And then everybody in the company was like, I want to write a story. I said, write a story. And and so there was stuff by other people in the design department. There was stuff by people from marketing. There was stuff from playtesters. It was really, really exciting for me. The implementation of the game system in Wars, taking Star Wars CCG and putting it in Wars, those of us that had worked with Star Wars CCG for a long time were a little frustrated with the fact that there were some very fuzzy bits. There was no stack in this game, in Star Wars CCG, but there was this just play thing. They said, well, we don't need a stack, we have just. I said, what do you mean just? I mean, that's just the word.
Yeah.
So
there was the actions thing as well, right? The just actions.
Yeah.
Was it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then, if it was an L5 art card, it would have been labeled reaction. That would be the right way to do it. So anyway, so we made some changes. I think we put a stack in there. We made some other changes. I thought there were improvements. I didn't think there were changes.
Right.
Yeah, Wars, I guess 2 sets came out.
Yeah.
And there was another set that was not published.
Oh, Edge of the Sword was going to come out, but it didn't. That's right.
Yes, it was. And it exists as a PDF. It's not, it doesn't have all the artwork done, and nothing's been tested.
Yeah.
But that's another case of you barreling along full steam, making cards for the set, and then they go, we're not going to do that. I say, okay, fine.
Okay.
I think that was about the time that Decipher started to have their issues.
Right.
In 2004, 2005.
Things became.
Yeah, I don't know that if everybody knows about this. I think there's probably articles on the web we could direct them to, but basically, one of the employees of Decipher was embezzling money from the company. And Warren and I are almost the same age. Warren Holland, he's like 6 months older than me. I still talk to him all the time. We're very good friends. He's always said he had an open door. He never closed the door of his office. So we used to talk about all kinds of things. I used to go in there just asking questions about, why are we doing this way in .hack? He said, well, do you want to do it differently? What do you want to do? It's best boss ever. So anyway, we started, there was a layoff, and I don't know how many people it was the first time, but people were getting called into this office, from it felt bad. And Trevor McGregor, I think, came in, and we we were in a room working on some lore. And he said, well, goodbye. And we said, what do you mean goodbye? And he said, I got laid off. I said, really? And he said, yeah. He said, yeah, I think there's like, I don't know if it's 17 people or 31 people. A lot of people got laid off with that first round. And we were all like, whoa, okay. So we continued, and there was a second layoff, which was me. And I think there was a third layoff. So yeah, that was a shame. It was had nothing to do with the work we were doing or the people that were there or the efforts they were making or the job they were doing. It's just that it was just financially impossible to continue at that point. It was bad.
That was such a shame, because Decipher was on such a track to sort of start to bring forth collectible games and sort of step into a new realm where they're driving their own proprietary driven games. And it's such a shame that things that happened, again, we won't talk about it in this episode, but there was some unfortunateness, especially so close to the heart of the company, that it unfortunately destroyed the history of Decipher and the legacy moving forward.
Yeah.
I don't know if you have any memories of it, but I know that Warren Holland wanted to explore proprietary collectible games. Proprietary collectible games are having their best year ever this year. I would be fascinated to see what happened if that was possible back in 2005, 2006, 2007. Do you have any knowledge of another game that Warren Holland himself was hoping to bring out from Decipher in the years following Wars?
I don't know exactly when it happened, but there's a game called Fight Club with a K, that was made by some of the people that used to work there. And it was based on, the idea for that was, let's get some properties. There's no big properties left. So it had properties like Saw and Tank Girl, and you could mix and match. Yeah, right. Yeah, and you can mix and match them and play some really wacky games, and it's kind of cool. But that was the idea moving forward, that you would get little licenses and doing it that way, which I thought was kind of neat. But I wasn't actually involved in that.
So, all right. So Wars is going to come out. Obviously, Decipher is very excited. They're putting a lot of effort into the Wars property. This is their first ever proprietary collectible game. They've got their own characters, their own design, their own new timing and stuff like that. And Gen Con comes around in 2004, I believe, and it is actually one of the biggest turnouts for a Decipher game to date. What were your memories from that time?
We had a lot of cool T-shirts. I remember that. It was like any other
no
event.
hats?
What's that?
No hats?
No hats. No, I don't have the shirts anymore. I think I do, but they're put away. But they were very classic. Anyway.
Yep.
But I mean, we did that all the time. We had big sealed deck events, and I don't know how big it was.
Yep.
I was there to help, and I don't think I made any rulings or anything, but I was there to help, pass out decks and stuff like that. I'll never forget running a very late sealed deck, I think for Star Wars, very late in Gen Con. It was like 11 p.m. or something. And I remember Kendrick saying, if you join this just to get the cards and you don't really want to play, you can go home now. It was really late. But anyway, yeah. So we ran sealed deck, and sure, it had a big push. Absolutely.
Yeah, it definitely had a big push. Unfortunately, the market didn't take it. Did you get any sense from inside the company why it wasn't catching on? Was there feedback from players or feedback from retailers about why this proprietary game hadn't caught on in the same way that, even though it's the same mechanics, in the same way that Star Wars did years earlier?
Well, Star Wars, of course, was sold out before we even started working on it. I mean, the first set.
Right.
So that was a slam dunk. But as far as Wars go, I should also point out that I think the game was originally called the Moomin Rift, which is the terror in time and space in which the aliens came through to the solar system. That is the actual rift. Yep. We wanted to, but then there's a role-playing game called Rift, and there were issues there, and we had to come up with another name. And when somebody said we should call it Wars, and I said, that sounds great. And everybody else said, no, it doesn't. It sounds terrible. And they were right. Because to this day, looking up, trying to find out booster packs on eBay or something, it's really hard to find. It's not a good.
Well, what did you know of SEO back then?
No, did not know about SEO. I learned about that at Madden, but we'll talk about that. Yeah. But I mean, we should have had enough brains to figure out that it would be hard to search for. We already been through the thing with .hack, because you can't put in period hack and look for it. It doesn't work. The Bandai's place website for .hack is period DOTHACK. You know, because they know it doesn't work either. But anyway, yeah, I don't know. And it's hard to say because it was just gaining. It was really just building steam when everything blew up and we all got laid off. So it's hard to say exactly what happened there. I feel like we wrote all the stories and they were well received. The art was fantastic. The old Star Wars guys complained about the rules changes, and I think perhaps we marketed too much to the old Star Wars guys, thinking we had them in our back pocket, and then they didn't like it. So that certainly didn't help things. But I can't really say. I'm not, I was never involved in the marketing that much, or being able to find out what happened there. But as far as I know, we gave it a big rollout, and I still have fond memories of it. I still have saved some of the artwork that hasn't come out yet, which is neat. I love the story I wrote about Raving Red Jane. It's the best thing I've ever written. I used to use some of those stories as samples, and people would say, "You have any writing samples?" And I go, "Yeah."
Well, it was such an opportunity. I feel like for the biggest CCG publisher that was known for licensed games, this opportunity to have a proprietary game to come forward. I feel like it was such an opportunity. And if history hadn't played out the way it was, I feel like it could have made itself, especially with those hardcore fans. Plus, you had the people who already knew how to play, basically, plus the magic timing rules. It might have been something. I don't know if you can see, but I've got a bunch of decks up there and some sealed boxes and a handful of other games and stuff like that from Wars, because I love what the essence of what Decipher was trying to do with that. And I would love to have known what could have happened if things had turned out differently.
Things also had changed in the sense that, the old Star Wars TCG compared to TCGs of today has a very big footprint. It has a lot of complicated rules. We thought we were streamlining the timing system, but either way, it's hard to figure out. It goes a lot of numbers on the cards. It's just, it wasn't going to be very accessible to people who were not already fans of Star Wars. And like I said, that didn't work too well. So it got a little neither efficient or foul there, and kind of fell between the cracks, or in between the Venn diagram didn't hook up, or whatever metaphor you'd like to use. But I have very fond memories of it. I mean, I wrote a lot of stories in that universe, and I had a great time.
Well, like I said, I'm completely elated that the fact that it gave you that opportunity to flex that other muscle that you hadn't done before, this almost fiction writing muscle. You obviously had to leave Decipher not long after that. Again, I would have loved to have seen what would have been born from this experiment, this Decipher in the proprietary games experiment. But my question is, now you've left Decipher, you're looking for another job. I believe the next thing you come along for is, again, another game, Battlestar Galactica. Do you have any stories from creating that, or working with an entire new team of people to bring this game that is a little bit different to anything else we've seen before to life? At
Gen Con, when Lord of the Rings was, not the year it came out, maybe the next year after that or whatever, I had an event where I was supposed to sit and talk to people who had questions about Lord of the Rings. So I sat at a table, and one guy showed up. His name is Matthew Robinson, and he worked for WizKids Games. And he said he wanted to ask me some questions about design, asked me questions about my design philosophy. And I was perfectly happy to talk about that. He was very intelligent, and I really enjoyed talking with him, and he was a nice guy. And so we had that talk, and I think we ended it with, like, here's my contact information, blah, blah, blah. And he never really said what was afoot, but he was looking for somebody to help them. They had a design for the Battlestar Galactica card game at WizKids, but they were not card game designers. So the game was really strange. And it was more like a miniatures game than a card game. A miniatures game with cards, which may sound like a good idea, but not in this case.
Okay.
I don't want to fault these guys, the guys at WizKids. I love the people at WizKids very much. One of them, of course, is Jordan Wiseman, who I'd known from long ago, back in Paranoid Press days. When we were working on Paranoid Press at Gen Con, he was sitting there working on Judges Guild. Is that what it was? I don't know what he was working on. Anyway, FASA was making supplements for Traveler as well. And at that point, they were developing BattleTech, which came out like the next year. I'm like, Jordan, you could have told me about that. I could have helped. He's like, ha ha ha, yeah, I know. So I went to work for Jordan again with Battlestar Galactica.
Right.
Now let's talk about the issues with the property of Battlestar. Now, I love the show. I watched the show. It was exciting. Now, again, there had only been a couple seasons.
Right.
Yeah. So if you're making a line of action figures for Battlestar Galactica, you say, hey, we need some images for the packaging. And they go, here you go. And they give you a CD that has, images of the 7 characters that are the lead characters and maybe 2 of each of those. And that's all it has. So we said, we want to make a collectible card game. And they said, okay, here's our images. And it had 7 characters. And we were like, that's not going to work. We need more characters.
Nope.
They said, oh, we can't do that. We can't do that. All these guys that show. I said, what about this guy that was a guard or something? No, we didn't get, when they signed a contract to work on the show, they didn't sign away their rights for their image.
Yeah.
So at one point, I'm trying to make this game, a full-fledged CCG, with 7 characters. I think there were 4. There were 4 versions of Starbuck, I think, in the first set. So I worked on this for a while. I was like, oh my God, this is not going to work.
Rare, uncommon, rare, ultra rare.
Yeah.
Vertical cycle.
Right. Starbuck with their uniform, Starbuck with their ship. Yeah, it's like Funko Pop. So anyway, eventually we worked that out and we got a few extra characters. But the other thing, of course, is the cut corners on the card.
Yeah, I was going to ask about that. So for those who don't know, if you've ever seen a Battlestar Galactica card, it's not a square or a rectangular card. It's actually like a I guess it's a rhombus, but it's actually octagonal. So there's cut corners. What did you actually think about that initially?
There, of course, in the show, every time they pick up a book, every time they read anything, the corners are cut off. That's where they go.
Yeah, of course.
It's a thing. It's just a style for the game, for the show.
But how does that affect a player who wants to sleeve their cards?
Like daily. I said, have we told you today that this is a bad idea? Did we tell you? Because we told you yesterday. Nothing's changing. They were horrible to sleeve. They had the ends would just flop up. It was just ridiculous. It was terrible.
Yeah. Go on.
The game itself, I was, given again, this is what I was trained to do. This is what my experience was here's a property. Here's a show. You even like this show, Chuck. Here's a show, and you need to make a game on this. I'm like, okay, let's go. So the first thing I noticed was that everybody ended up in jail. At some point, all the good guys, all the bad guys, everybody ended up in jail. So I don't remember how it worked, but I had things like if you got injured, you went on top of your deck. If you went to jail, you got shuffled into your deck. I had these like rules for changes of state and what they meant in a story sense. And the mechanic in the game was challenge because sometimes the fight would be verbal. Sometimes the president and Adama are having an argument. And I wanted to simulate that with the game. They're not punching each other out. They're challenging each other. So there was a very flexible system there, which I think worked very well. The problem of number 6, was that, of course, she did not exist as a physical character throughout much of the show. There was a version of called Shelley. I have a press sheet for this game. Shelley Godfrey, I think her name was. There was a lot of different versions of 6, and some of them were people's. Anyway, we used the keyword of vision, which meant this character cannot be challenged. So she was kind of like a walking enchantment. She would have things that would affect other parts of the game with her game text, but she could not be challenged and could not be removed. So that was fun. I think that worked out really well.
Yeah, it was an interesting idea.
From a gameplay standpoint, the Cylons were like this creepy exterior force that would show up and then menace everybody. And then at some point we decided, well, we have to make a Cylon base star. Why do we have to do that? Because we have to do that. And the Cylon base star was different from other base stars, and it was broken. So that didn't help. I'll never forget the story I had about the Versus game, Marvel's Versus game.
Yeah, the DC versus Marvel game, the basically comic book game.
Yeah. in that game, the most powerful character in that game at one point in the tournament scene was Boris.
Yeah.
No, Doris was a henchman for Doctor Doom. That's all he was. He was just a toady, a henchman.
Yeah.
He had some broken gameplay that made the most important character in the universe, which is something that happens with IPs. You never know what's going to happen. And it's always the ones that are oddball stuff, like number 6 or like the Cylon Base Star. You know, everything, it has to be cool and different and weird. Yeah. So it kind of stands on the outside of the rest of the game system. And sometimes that doesn't work.
Well, interestingly enough that you bring that up, because my second episode is with Justin Gary, who worked on Versus System, and he said one of the biggest challenges, there was a character, I believe, in the Justice League set, or one of the sets, called Ammon Samsara, that absolutely broke the game because they wanted to top down this spy mechanic, and the spy mechanic that they topped down accidentally broke the resource system.
Yeah.
Because this outside character shouldn't have like a Batman type effect. You want to make Batman completely accessible to a 6-year-old and to a 60-year-old.
Yeah.
Like, you don't want them to be some sort of fringe case. It's so funny that you mentioned that this is what licensed games involve. Like, sometimes you're just like, what can this character do? Oh, just give him draw 2 every time you turn a card.
Yeah.
And every time that you turn a card, draw 2. That's amazing. You know, it sounds great in the gameplay and the top-down mechanics because he's like a researcher or something like that. But all of a sudden, library researcher becomes the most broken card in the IP.
Yes, that's right. That's right. It's like Lando. We made Lando in Star Wars CCG. We made Dark Lando and Light Lando. And I think Dark Lando was best. And Light Lando was just terrible. So, yeah, that didn't work too well. But there are those cases where you have to do something different. And sometimes that's good. And sometimes it's not.
Okay, so Battlestar Galactica, there is 2 questions I selfishly want to ask about the game. First of all, this is one of those games that was sort of marketed and put out as a multiplayer CCG. There is very few of those. Battlestar Galactica, Babylon 5, there's very few where that the multiplayer aspect of a CCG comes into play. How did you find it different designing with that in mind? Like, that this game was going to be played not just by one person, but by a group of people, sort of like Jihad back in the day.
I think that once you decide how the multiplayer game works, by the way, I talked to people who played Lord of the Rings only multiplayer. At one point, they put me on, I was like the Answer Man phone. You have to do the Answer Man phone because somebody's not here today. I said, okay. And I talked to somebody.
You're the D Answer Man?
Yeah, I guess so, yeah. So somebody called up, and it was like somebody from Germany or something. And I said, well, do you always play multiplayer? And they said, yeah, that's all we ever play. And I said, wow. And there was a game, I'm digressing again. There was a game at Gen Con UK, which had, are you ready for this? 29 players.
Wait, of Lord of the Rings, 29 people playing concurrently?
Yes, at the same time.
That's insane.
And there was some guy who said, screw it, I'm going to make a run. And he made a run to trying to get all the way to Mount Doom in the first turn, and he came up like one site short. This is the best story ever. So I don't know how the rest of the game went. It was probably a disaster, but lots of people played that multiplayer, and I thought that was great. It's interesting now to see with Commander being such a big deal in Magic about how they're making things. You want to make a card that works, you know, in 2-player and has some kind of bonus in multiplayer. Sometimes it's just a simple wording change that does that. I don't remember directly addressing that in Battlestar Galactica. I don't remember writing cards that were designed to be Siphon Soul, for example, the magic card that says, I don't know, each of your opponents loses 2 life and you gain 2 life or something like that. And when we were playing, we used to play a lot of multiplayer games up at the shop, and it was like an 8-player game, and somebody played Siphon Soul, and he got like, 14 life, and all of us lost 2. We all got very quiet. We were like, don't play that card again.
Well, I mean, there are certain cards in the Commander format nowadays that are completely banned because every player discards 1 and you get 2 life or something like that. There are cards that mechanically don't work in multiplayer because they weren't thought about way back when.
Yeah, right. That's true. It's a different thing. It's like it's something that you want to know when you're designing. Obviously, one of the first questions you make is this only going to be a 2-player game or will it be a multiplayer game, because it affects quite a few decisions down the road. I don't remember. The question is always, Jihad, Vampire of the Eternal Struggle, was always the best because you attacked to the left and the guy on your right was attacking you. I just thought that was
the prey and predator mechanic. Yep.
I love that game so much. And so the question in Battlestar was, how are things sequenced? I think I could just attack anybody. I don't know how anybody else. It might have been more like L5R in the sense that I'm attacking the guy across the table, and now we go around the table to see who wants to poke their nose in. It's probably like that. Anyway, I don't know. I guess there was another set of Battlestar Galactica after I left. I think there was a second set.
Betrayal, yeah, Betrayal came out after that. Yep.
Okay, and then by then the show had shown, all on the Watchtower, and everybody was turning into Cylons. And it was like, holy crap! Well, that's
the tricky thing about, especially a living a living IP game at that time. Like, you don't know where the IP wants to go. Like, could you imagine making a CCG for Lost, or as was explored with our previous guest, Jason Winter's company? They were exploring the idea of doing a Heroes card game that was, who knows where that would have ended up if they started to do that in 2007. Who knows where they would have ended up in 2010? That would have been so restrictive on the designers, correct?
Yeah, it's tough. I mean, when you look at the games that Decipher worked on, and Star Wars was all done when we started, in '94. I mean, it started up again. Special edition was just, more pictures. Yeah, it's a lot easier to say. It would have been some challenges for Battlestar Galactica had it gone on to another set or two, for sure.
Right.
I would have looked forward to making that Starbuck is God card, though. That would have been great.
That would have been an overpowered card for sure. So you actually ended up working on, again, at least one more physical, or at least hybrid physical digital card game that was based on a famous sci-fi property. This time it was Stargate. Do you want to talk to me about how that came about, how that, where it was in the process when you joined the game?
Talking to Scott Barnes, and he says, come on out and work for us. He knows me, he knows what I can do. It's like, I mean, it's one of those situations where there's not an interview. Scott just says, you want to work here? I go, yeah, sure. I said, when do you want me to start? Okay. Because he knows what I can do. We've talked so many times. He knows what I do. So, and Evan is there. He can say, well, yeah, he does this. So anyway, Evan knows all the real stories. So, I go out there, and they're working on this Pirates of the Spanish Main game, which I had some involvement with. And they're also working on the Stargate game. And I said, Stargate, yeah, that was a good movie. And they said, no, we're working on the TV series. I said, oh, I haven't watched much of that. They said, okay. So got up to speed, started watching episodes like crazy, which I liked, by the way. I thought they were really good. I liked the cast very much. And then, I was coming in at a later time. I don't know exactly when, if it was the first set they were working on or what, but they would say, do you have any idea? What do you think of this? Do you have any ideas for that? And I would look at a card and say, well, what if it did this? And they go, oh, that's good. So it was, kind of a little review there later on. And then as the sets continued, and it was online and physical, which was not a problem for Worlds Apart. They had been doing a Lord of the Rings game, So, but it makes a difference when you're designing a game. If it's going to be only digital, there's a tremendous world of things that you can do. But if it's also physical, then that's different. So Stargate, I think, did pretty well. It had tournaments and stuff. I thought the game was well designed, and not, it was a standard CCG. It had a few card types and a few keywords, and but I certainly was not Star Wars or Magic complication. So I think that helped its appeal, I think. But I like the game design, and I worked on it a little bit. I don't know how many sets it had. I want to say like 3, but maybe that's
3.
Is that right?
Yeah.
Okay.
System Lords, Rise of the Ori, and the original set.
Okay.
I think.
I had the other thing that happens too with promo cards. Promo cards have to be something. It's best if there's something interesting and fun and kind of out of the mainstream. We were talking about working with things like Lando. You don't know what to do with them, but a promo card could be something cool. So it wasn't unusual for like a Decipher for the Star Wars people to turn to the Star Trek guys and say, we need a promo card. What do you think about, what ideas do you have for this character? And then people would come up with fresh ideas. Those were good. So I think I came up with some ideas for some promo cards for Stargate, just out of nowhere. So that was fun. And I think most of my time there, I don't think I was ever designing a bunch of cards for Stargate. I could be wrong, but I don't remember doing that.
Oh my God, Chuck, you have had such a career. So the questions I have for you now are all from the community. Believe it or not, there are still people who are playing these games that you put so much effort in for years before. So let me ask you some of our community questions. I have got a ton I want to touch on. So the first question I have comes from Scott Johnson. Who did Decipher consult when creating lore for the cards? Did anyone ensure that the continuity was maintained? So obviously you mentioned before that you were liaisoning with Lucasfilm. Was there any like Bible or anything like that that you had to refer to when it came to putting new characters into the game?
There were a number of things that were happening at the same time. For example, there were books like Tales of the Bounty Hunters being written, physical books of an anthology of short stories. And we were hooked up with all that stuff. We talked to the guys from West End Games who were doing the Star Wars game at that point. So yeah, all that was networking. Lucasfilm was very good about putting people in touch with everything else. And in terms of who, it's always the licensor who determines, you know, whatever crazy stuff we come up with. So if you're asking me, was the swing and a miss lore that talks about a baseball game, was that approved by Lucas? Yes, it was.
I don't know if you would have got away with that with Disney owning the property now.
I don't know how that works, you know, but yeah, they were the best.
Well, that interestingly leads me to my next question, which is from Bentley Boyd. He asks, do you think that a CCG could successfully be expanded, like the Star Wars CCG successfully expanded with the current Disney characters? Like what, to elaborate on that, what sort of new Star Wars stuff have you seen that sort of thinks that you could incorporate that into the game? I guess to sort of narrow that down, when you watch a new Star Wars property or like a new film or something like that, do you think to yourself, oh, this is how this would work in the Star Wars CCG? You
mean that thing that happens when a designer is watching a movie or a TV show and says, that could be a card? Sure, that happens.
Yep. So you watch Mandalorian and just be like, oh, I could have done that. Oh, I could have done that.
I want to tell you something. I used to know the names of all the pod racers in episode 1, all of them intimately. And when I was watching episode 1 and I couldn't name one of the pod racers, I was happy because I feel like I have so much of that stuff that was taking up so much of my brain. Now I'm moving it off and I'm learning new things.
Yeah.
So no, I don't have that feeling anymore. Could the Mandalorian and the Bad Batch make it into Star Wars CCG? Absolutely. Now go talk to the PC Council. You know, we have a Star Wars CCG players committee that is making new cards all the time. So yeah, let's do that. Sure. I'm totally for it.
Okay, so if you're watching and you haven't heard of the Players Committee, there will be a link in the description. I promise I will definitely put a link in the description to them. You can basically do print and play cards, and they have been keeping the game up to date and balanced with new Star Wars properties since then.
Yep.
Check it out. It'll be in the description.
Yep.
So my next question, Chuck, is from Aaron F. He asks, and a lot more of a general question, which mechanics were difficult to design/balance, and which were the most fun to design for? And that can span any of your games.
Well, the first thing that comes to mind is I don't even remember what they were called. Were they called operations? What were the things that you played on the table and you did something and then flipped them back over for Star Wars? Objectives, that's the word. I knew it started with an O. Those were very difficult to design. A lot of them were designed to be, let's take a bunch of cards that aren't really very good, and when you play a bunch of them together, like you're going to play a truckload of Y-Wings, and then you're going to conquer the universe. So you know, in terms of what are you using as fuel for this thing? How does it flip? Yeah, how does it flip? That's very important. And what does it do on the other side? These are all very big questions regarding these things. So I'd say that's probably the hardest thing to design.
Right. And what was the most fun?
Some of the funnest things I had were in Dot Hack Enemy, one of my very favoriteest games. We had a limit of 3 PCs because you could have 3 PCs at your party. But in the anime, there was a group. There were 4 women fighters who were diamonds, hearts, clubs, and spades. So I developed a way to have 4 of them and play at the same time. That was fun. That was fun. I did a lot of.
That's fantastic.
I did a lot of fun things with .hack, and like I said, I have very fond memories of it.
That's amazing. Well, it seems like .hack was sort of your open sandbox. Like, yes, it was a licensed game, but it sort of feel like that it had such an acceptable licensor that you could do almost anything you wanted to do so long as there was an image for it.
Now, I have to point out that my real sandbox was Young Jedi, which, as I discussed before, nobody else really wanted to work on. So it was my little sandbox, my little corner, where I did things like game mechanics that referred to the card number. I did Decipher cards with tokens on them. Oh, the hue and cry there was. A Decipher card with a token on it. I got to do lots of interesting things there. But at a certain point, it was like, this is the proving ground. We're going to try this and see what our fans think. So that's awful fun.
Right? Absolutely. So I love seeing those sort of things writ large. There is a quick question I just want to ask. Where did the deck building restriction come from in Young Jedi?
That was not my idea. That.
No?
I don't know who came up with that, but it was fascinating. And
yeah, it was unusual.
Yeah.
Definitely unique. It
was supposed to be easy. It was supposed to make deck building easy. Deck building is the biggest hurdle you have to get over when you're playing a CCG. It's the biggest problem.
Right.
It's let's work on this game when we're not playing it. You know, when we're playing Monopoly, neither of us are working on it when we're not playing it. But if you're playing a miniatures game, you're painting miniatures. If you're playing a role-playing game, somebody's writing the scenario. But the idea of spending time on the game when you're not playing it is pretty weird for a lot of people.
Yeah. The meta game.
Yeah, the meta game, right.
Right, absolutely. Okay, so I do have another question. This one is from Scott Church, who runs a website that sells, classic collectible card games. Mm-hmm. He actually mentions your Matrix ideas. Did any of the Matrix work that you guys had done prior to that coming out, did you guys actually design any cards for it or anything like that? No. We had made the unfortunate decision that it wasn't a good idea for CCG. So we went right into making trading cards. I've had some thoughts since then. Right. It'd be such an interesting thing to do years later, right? Especially in this sort of collectible games boom that we're sort of seeing right now in 2021. Well, one of my heroes was Jim Dunnigan at SBI. And people would ask him, like, can you do a game on anything? And he said, yeah. They said, really? Any subject whatsoever? He said, yeah. And they said, what about like sex? And he said, well, I have some ideas on that, but I'm still working on the research. Well, I mean, CCG fans, I'm going to point them to James Ernest and Phil Folligo's Xenophile adult collectible card game. If you haven't learned it, look it up. James Ernest is a rebel of the genre. He should definitely go down in history as that. And also, every card in that game is rare. You just blew my mind. What? That's what it says in the rules. You don't have to chase anything because every card is rare. Oh, right. All of them have a flat rarity. Yes. Yes. They have a flat rarity. Yes. That's fantastic. That was such an innovative. I would love to talk to James. This is all getting cut, but I would love to talk to James. I think there's a Girl Genius version with the same game system. Yeah. It's the new, well, not a new version, but it's almost a reworking of the same mechanics, the twisting and the popping and the... Yeah. James is fun. I was on a panel with him and Richard Garfield and Christian Peterson from Fantasy Flight. Right. Oh my God. I would love to hear that story about being on that panel. That's amazing. It was fun. Because I don't think it'll exist online. I'll double check, but I don't think it does. No. Yeah, it was just prior to like everything that's ever happened ever goes online, Yeah, that's true. Okay, so I'm going to cut back in here. So, because we've just had a little digression. Yeah. So, all right. So my next question is from actually a previous Squadron member and Decipher fan, Jason Robinette. You may recognize the name. Oh, no, not him. No. He wants to know, this is a pretty complex question, Chuck. Decipher CCGs dealt with tournament card legality very differently. Well, what is your perspective on what is the healthiest way to deal with card legality in collectible games. Some examples are obviously Star Wars did that thing we talked about before, where it's like you errata and change cards after they're released. Obviously, Lord of the Rings did things like the block structure, similar to Magic the Gathering. Right. What's your opinion on card legality in a collectible game?
I can certainly easily dodge this question from the nefarious Mr. Robinette by simply saying that that was never my purview, actually. I was never in charge of tournaments or somebody that had to work out this stuff. I mean, my involvement would be, let's make a starter deck that, you know, we can play in this kind of tournament or whatever. So that was pretty much what my involvement was. Obviously, errata on physical cards is a problem. I know I worked for Direwolf Games for a while. They have an online game called Eternal, in which they routinely errata cards that are too powerful. And they also boost cards that are not, that need a boost. I mean, people always wanted Decipher deal. Well, if you errata cards, you should make cards better too. Well, they do that in Eternal. They do it all the time. It's a very exciting and vibrant format, and you can do that when the card game is online. So physically, I think the best thing is not physical, not errata, but banning, the way that Magic does it. Because the problem with errata is that you know, Bob comes into the shop and he's all ready to play with this deck he made based on that one card. Nobody told him that one card got errata last weekend. So his deck is shot, you know, and so what's he supposed to do? So anyway, yeah, that's about all I have to say about that. Those are very, very big and very important questions for the tournament scene. And that's not really something I feel qualified to comment on. It just has not been something that I've been involved with that much. Jason, I know, has been involved in games in more senses than, I mean, I'm just the game designer, you know, I've made a few marketing suggestions, but in terms of operating tournaments and stuff, I haven't been there. I bet Jason has probably.
Absolutely. Well, he obviously has launched a number of games himself. It is a tricky situation to have to deal with the fact that you're telling people that their cards are invalidated, especially in a collectible game where the idea is chasing cards. Obviously, Magic the Gathering deals with this on a regular basis. They're constantly banning very rare cards and stuff like that. And it is something that's much easier to deal with on a digital format, or to use Magic the Gathering's example, Arena, like they errata it or offer a wild card or something like that. It is a sticky situation for those of us who love physical gameplay, but at the same time, you know, it's the dance with the devil, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. It's tough.
Yeah, absolutely. So the thing is, I do want to ask another question. This one is from Mike Greenlist. Considering Decipher's previous record, I don't know how much you will have an opinion on this, but considering Decipher's a previous record, how tricky was it to keep the Lord of the Rings trading card game on schedule? Was that something that was done easily, or was that something where specific techniques for that game were developed so that things would meet the actual shipping date?
Well, I think that there were times when, like I talked about Young Jedi being supposedly on a 2-month schedule, and that totally did not happen. I know there were vast gaps in between Star Trek releases. All I can say is that we got better at this sort of thing as we went along, and by the time we got to Lord of the Rings, of course, was the big man on campus, or the big kid on the block, or the 800-pound gorilla, or whatever. So, you know, if we need to pull resources from somebody working on, I don't know, Beyblade or something, we would do that and do whatever we could to make it come out on time. I worked on mostly 2 Lord of the Rings sets, so I don't think I followed it too much after that. I don't know if it had those big gaps in there either, or if he's asking, you hit the marks, how did you do that? I don't know, but good for us.
Well, you guys definitely did, as far as at least releasing with the films went. Like, obviously, every single set needed to follow a specific film being released, and those all hit their marks perfectly. There was delays later on, but that didn't come, obviously, when the films were still coming out. This
reminds me of working on the Endor set, because the Star Wars movies were all planned out. I mean, you can see how they're broken down. And working on the Endor set, I said, what about this? No, that's for Death Star. What about this? No, that's for Death Star. What about this? No, that's for Death Star. It's like, well, what do we got left?
Death Star 2, yeah.
What we got? Death Star 2, right. We got Ewoks, and that's about it. So I don't know. But yeah, there was a plan there, certainly. And certainly there was a plan for Lord of the Rings movies too, yeah.
That's so interesting you say that, because so many iconic cards come from Death Star 2. So maybe those ideas were pushed into that sort of bracket just to sort of bring this ironically, this big finale of the trilogy, which would obviously end up getting continued when Lucas started to bring out the prequels. This big finale was supposed to be, building a crescendo to the end of the Star Wars CCG.
Yeah. Well, I guess, okay, maybe. I just felt like I was, told to make Endor out of whatever was left. So there you go. I have my own.
You did well with Wicket and Friends.
I have my own personal perspective on this.
Okay. Well, I mean, if you ever want to share.
No, I'm not being cranky. I'm just saying that I was frustrated because we couldn't do all the cool stuff that was going to come out in Best Star. But anyway.
Right. Of course. Yeah. They wanted to hold it over to that sort of like finale sort of set, right?
Yeah, they had a plan. Yeah, working on Star Wars games is never bad. So.
Okay. So Chuck, my next question is from Travis Morton. He asks you, he's obviously a big fan of .hack. And he asks you, what is the biggest triumph that you saw from bringing out .hack? And now that it's 15 years later, do you see anything that has influenced other games from this design that you made all those years ago?
I don't know. I think that the resource system in there, I don't know that it was kind of like what we did in Lord of the Rings, as far as spotting things. And I always liked that. I think it worked well at .hack. And I haven't seen it. I haven't really played too many CCGs that are not online personally. I haven't played some of the paper stuff that's come out recently. So I couldn't say if those things have shown up. But if they have, that's great, because you can't copyright gameplay. So let's go. please use it for other things. Yeah, that's great.
That's fantastic. I always found the spotting mechanic to be so unique, basically, that you could use other people's cards almost as a resource. I thought that was so innovative. Do you have a specific inspiration for that, or was there something that you referred to at the time that inspired that particular mechanic?
I don't remember where that came from, but I can tell you that the thing that I don't like to design about CCGs is the resource system, which is why I was so happy with the dumb system that we have in Young Jedi, which is you get another $1 to spend every turn, which is basically the same as Hearthstone. And it's the resource system for people who don't want to muck around with a resource system. It's such an important part of the game, and it can be something very clever. In Jedi Knights, it was very clever. In Lord of the Rings, it was masterful. And I think I've tried to come up with awesome new resource systems. If I could come up with one, I'd probably design a game, because the combat stuff I enjoy very much, and it's easy. Conflict. There's no combat in Battlestar Galactica. Everybody's just challenging everyone. Yeah, so another game we haven't mentioned that I love dearly and played a ton of was On the Edge CCG. Absolutely love that game. We played to death, and it has this arrangement of rank and file where you have to attack through someone's conspiracy, as it's called. Marvelous game. So yeah, if I had an idea like that, I'd make a game, but that hasn't happened yet.
I would love to see a 2021, especially in this time, this surge of collectible games. I'd love to see an original proprietary Chuck Kallenbach CCG. Yeah. I would love to see what you come up with.
That would be great. But let me point out that I am retired, and it's a weird thing. It's a weird thing not to have a job, but I'm kind of liking it. So we'll see.
Yeah. Well, I mean. A lot of retirees have put out some amazing work.
That's right. Remember, I started to Decipher when I was like 40 years old or something. So it's time for another career, I guess.
Right?
Yeah.
Okay. So my next community question comes from Zach Hedduck. And he asks if you recall if there was any mechanics for the Lord of the Rings TCG that were designed but then dropped after being tested. Can you tell us about those and what happened? Was there anything that was in the early game that, because Decipher was revolutionizing the way that they did collectible games, was there anything that the Lord of the Rings did that ended up getting dropped eventually?
I know that there were a lot of things added from the original prototype that was developed. There were a lot of things added early on, like site numbers and the idea of getting Shadow Twilight Pool from site specifically. But right. People are always asking were there mechanics that were developed and not used, and I always feel like these are like deleted scenes from the movie. And as Quentin Tarantino says, there are no deleted scenes because I took them out, and they're not in the movie because I didn't like them. So, often that's the case.
Yep.
The kind of things that people are kind of looking for are sometimes a mechanic gets used in another game later. Sometimes that certainly happens. And there were times at Decipher where we were working on so many games at once that sometimes things would kind of cross-pollinate from place to place. But generally speaking, the deleted scenes were bad scenes.
Right, absolutely. So the last community question I have is more of like, I think that somebody wants a perspective on it. After years, I put up this that you were a previous Decipher employee and stuff like that. And jokingly, a lot of people answered with a similar sort of concept. And I guess we all just want to know what your opinion and what your experience was with this particular Decipher product. It's sort of a butt of the joke in the CCG community, but what do you remember about Boy Crazy?
Boy Crazy!
And were you involved with it?
Wow. I don't think the Chuck card was very good.
The Chuck card?
Yeah. Wow. Yeah, that game was like top trumps. No, I was not involved with it. I did some playtesting of it. I was kind of like,
right.
This is a game, right? It's not so.
Did you?
It's not really a game. It's like you have some cards. Would you like to do something with them? Well, you could do this.
Yeah.
So
it's definitely the butt of Decipher jokes nowadays in the community. Obviously,
I thought you were going to say Austin Powers for a second there, but I thought no, he's talking about
Austin Powers is something I really wanted to talk about that we didn't get to today, unfortunately.
Yeah, I'll tell you a very simple thing about it. When they had me play tested, they said you put your finger up like this, and the last one to do it, has to give up a card or something. And I said, well, how are you going to rule that at tournaments? And they said, it's a party game, Chuck. And I was like, oh, this is cool. Yeah, this is fun. I like this. Okay.
That's fantastic. Yeah, it was definitely a very lightweight CCG. I did like some of the things that the Austin Powers CCG did, for sure.
It's a lot of fun.
Okay, well, that pretty much brings us to the end of our interview. There's one last thing we love to do, and these booster pack podcasts, we have ourselves the Kracken Questions game.
Oh my God.
So you choose one color. There is, in these booster packs, there is 4 additional podcast questions.
Nice.
You choose one of them. There will be 3 very silly, very crazy, very off-the-wall common questions and 1 rare game design related question. What color do you want me to crack right now? I have no idea what's in them.
This is the part where I get embarrassed. Okay, I'm going to pick the pink one because I like red, and that's not very red. But I'll take...
Well, I'm sorry my printer might have been out of ink, buddy.
Well, hey, we're professionals here. Let's get this together.
These are playtest versions. They're not going mass market. You can talk.
Okay. Right. It's going to get better.
I saw your Young Jedi cards. All right. To match your shirt, we're going to go red, not pink, but we're going to go red. All right. I'm going to crack it on camera and find out what's in it. Let's see. So again, there's going to be 3 silly, completely off the wall questions and 1 rare question.
Uh-oh.
So, all right. Easy one. I'm pretty sure we've had this one before. Common question. Who would win? X-Men's Gambit or Robin from Batman?
Oh my God. Robin couldn't beat anybody. So yeah, Gambit. Oh my God. What kind of question is that?
That's an easy, like I said, it was an easy one. Sometimes common, as you know, sometimes common cards are just junk.
Okay, fine.
Oh, okay. Here's an interesting one. What was your longest video game save file?
Oh, longest. Do you want to know which game I played the most?
Yeah. Well, basically.
I don't know that it has the long. Yeah, it has to be. I played 300 hours of Skyrim. So that's the one.
Wow. Okay. Wow.
Yeah.
Okay. Skyrim gets it then.
Got me a job too. Yeah.
Yeah, it did. Designing cards for it. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Again, another easy one. This is what happens with randomization, right? Sometimes you can't control what happens. Who would win? Godzilla or King Kong?
Oh boy, this is a classic. I feel like I have to go with the Primate, I think. Although I'm a big Godzilla fan. I don't know. I watched that movie and I didn't know who to root for. So it's a tough call. I'm gonna go with Godzilla because he makes a cool noise. And
yeah. He's got a lot of really powerful friends too.
Yeah, that's right. Who's a friend of King Kong,
Yeah, exactly, right?
I mean, Godzuki, right? From the cartoon.
Yeah, exactly. Son of Kong or something like that.
Oh, yeah.
Mighty Joe Young.
Right? Oh, yeah, there you go. Nothing.
Okay, so your rare question is a game design related question. Something that I feel like you're very qualified to answer. What is your least favorite thing about collectible games?
What is my least favorite thing? I didn't get paid enough making them. No, that's not right.
More mechanically minded question, but I'm happy to take that if that's your final answer.
I will tell you, when I started to work for Paul Denon, he would come up out of nowhere and ask me these questions. And he said, what's your least favorite mechanic in CCGs? And I said, stealing cards. In particular, at the time, I was talking about the card called Kolot Master in L5R, which allows you to steal cards. Again, this is similar to my Destiny discussion. I have bought this card. I have put this card in my deck. I have paid whatever I paid to play it. And now you get to take it? That's just wrong. Yeah, that's not so my favorite thing.
Mind control, like stealing, everything like that. You don't like other people touching your stuff.
Well, I don't mind I'm certainly not a collector. You can touch my stuff all you want, but I don't want you taking my cards that I have worked hard to collect and admire and play, and now it's yours. And that's, just kill it. Put it back in my hand.
Absolutely.
Anything else, just don't.
That's hilarious.
So yeah, that's definitely my least favorite.
All right, well, that brings us to the end of another episode of the Booster Pack. Goodbye from me. Goodbye from you, Chuck.
Yeah, goodbye. Thanks a lot.
Goodbye. Absolutely. It has been an amazing, enlightening conversation, and one that spanned sagas, much like the Star Wars saga. All right, from me, I am Rands, and thank you for watching the Booster Pack. Remember, keep shuffling. There you have it, guys. Our two-parter with Chuck Kallenbach. Keep an eye out. Our next episode will be a bonus rare slot episode where Chuck talks about some of the lost Decipher CCGs, the ones that they could have produced but didn't. There was some fascinating titles mentioned there, and I loved hearing about it. Now, all the usual stuff at the end of these episodes, I like to let you know that you can leave me feedback either in the comments below or on Facebook with CCG History or at CCG History on Twitter. You can also let us know if there is a specific game you want to hear about in this show, and we will do our best to bring you an episode about that collectible game. All right, that's it from me. Until next time, I've said it once and I will say it again. Keep shuffling.